Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
This thread is for strange unexplained things that weren't supposed to happen. There is not much evidence other than witnesses to support these glitches in reality. I've read stories where car rides took unusually long or unusually short. A man driving takes a right turn and then the same right turn comes up right afterwards. Some of his passengers noticed it and asked him if he hadn't just taken that turn. Another form of a reality glitch I've noticed is when someone pulls off something incredible somehow and then is never again able to repeat it no matter how many tries. Like accidentally walking through a wall and then when you try to do it again you can't. It also happens in the reverse sometimes, that something you usually do easily doesn't work for one day and then it always works again after that. Some people call these anti-miracles because these things can often be very negative.
Bear with me while I set the scene. On 9/11, I heard about what happened while I was on a walk that morning after dropping my kids off to school. A neighbor informed me. So I rushed home to turn on the news, watched most of the day in horror, and it messed with me a lot. I went to work that afternoon feeling drained and dumbfounded. As I drove to work, there weren't many cars on the road. I saw in the sky probably hundreds of crosses and X shapes as far as I could see. There were no other clouds in the sky, just those shapes. They weren't long lines, not like contrails or chemtrails. They were small X's and crosses. That day and every other time I've mentioned it to someone, no one else saw them. I know I'm not crazy, and I remember thinking I thought no planes were supposed to be flying, as I considered that maybe some pilots did it to honor the victims. It just didn't make sense to me. I saw another cloud phenomenon another time too. It looked like someone photoshopped the sky. I wish I had my camera. It was an image of an old man's face with a fairy-like figure hovering in front of his nose. I stared for so long at it to embed it in my memory, and it didn't change for the longest time, even though other clouds around it were moving, albeit slowly. I'm not sure if this is what you meant by reality glitches, but they are the first things that popped into my mind as I read your post.
I've witnessed an occasion on which a man was walking on a scaffold which promptly collapsed, leaving him floating upright in mid-air until he walked, on where the scaffold would have been, to the nearest building to safety. No real explanation for that one. Just a glitch. He didn't mind though.
I am not 100% sure if my experiences are reality glitches, but here it goes. A couple of months ago, I believe it was November, I woke up one morning and it felt like days went by in a single night. For some reason, I was convinced that 3 days went by, but when I asked my mother what day it was only the very next day. I had the same experience this morning, only this time it felt like one day had gone by. I had to double check my calendar just to convince myself. I find this odd, and it never happened to me before November last year.
There is a section of highway where I live where I have had a number of reality glitches or time shift or something weird. I live on the Calif coast near Malibu. To travel to the airport LAX, the logical route is the Pacific Coast Highway. I was driving there on a nice day just checking out the ocean and looking at the scenery. I passed a huge yellow tour bus parked alongside the road. The people were outside taking pictures of the ocean and the coastline. I then came up on a small-sized delivery-type van with graffiti on the back door parked along the roadside. I continued along driving, checking out the scenery, monitoring my speed and being very aware. After a period, I came down the grade past the university on my left into a little commercial area. Stopped ahead of me at the light was both the bright yellow bus and the delivery van with the graffiti on it. They had never passed me on the road. This has happened to me more than once on this stretch of highway.
I think my mom and brother are the only ones who know about this. I was in the car with my mom and older brother. My mom was driving, and I was in the back seat, looking out the window. This was a year or so ago. Anyways, we were driving on the highway, probably between 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. I know it was night. I was telling them a ghost story I had heard about the highway. Apparently, in the middle of the night, usually when it's foggy. I believe it was foggy when this happened, you can see a girl crying. She is harmless, but usually looking for something, like a necklace. It is said that she was in a car crash. I really like to tell scary stories. Well, after I was done telling it and I looked out the window, I saw a green thunderbolt, and the sky lit up a bit, with a green tint. There was no sound, nothing. I got a bit scared, and it happened a second time. I told my mom and brother, and they said I was just scared from the story. Neither of them had seen anything. I was starting to get really scared and they said not to look out the window, but I did. Many times. It seemed as if it would always happen a few moments after I would look outside. I'd never seen green lightning before, and the fact that there was no sound, I was the only one that saw it, and that the sky even got a greenish tint scared me. I even looked it up to see if green lightning was significant for anything, but got nothing. Not sure if this is a reality glitch or what.
I've been wondering how to put this down since this afternoon and decided that all the information would need to be listed. I'm sorry as it's quite some size, but I want any readers to have as full a picture as possible. I'm open-minded and not easily freaked out, but since yesterday I have had 4 experiences that I can't explain. At approx 9:15 a.m. yesterday I was in my car, in my drive, loading my mobile studio ready to go do a shoot. I'm a photographer. My neighbor who lives across the street from me reversed his car into the road, rolled down his window and called to me. "Hey Anon, how are you?" I replied, "I'm a good mate," to which he gave me a thumbs up and drove away. I returned to my home, lifted another bag of equipment, returned to my car and put it in the back door. Max 30 seconds to get this bag and return to the car. I looked across to see my neighbor repeating the exact same maneuver, complete with the same greeting of "Hey Anon, how are you?" I replied exactly as before, to which he gave me a thumbs up and drove away. It never crossed my mind to say "I heard you earlier" and replied, and felt the situation quite surreal. I finished the shoot and was home by 1 p.m. My wife was out, so I made coffee and went to the computer room to have a look at the photographs I had taken. I placed the card in the card reader and waited till the raw files had loaded on my computer. A quick glance meant that 6 or 7 of them needed to be deleted due to wrong exposure, and I duly deleted them. At that moment my wife came and I greeted her with a "Hey, how was your morning?" She replied, "Okay, yours." At her request I made her a coffee and left it on the kitchen table, as she put shopping away, and I came back to the computer only to see the files still showing on the card. So not wanting to risk losing them, I decided to get the USB cable and link the camera directly to the computer. I then downloaded the photographs to a directory called Work in Progress. My workflow is really important. Now things start to get really weird. As I'm sitting at the computer, my wife comes in the front door and greeted me with, "Hey, I didn't expect you back so soon. You could have picked me up with these heavy bags if I'd known." I said, "Yeah, sorry," and told her that her coffee was on the table. She said, "Brilliant, you saw me coming," but her coffee wasn't there. A discussion followed that leads me to believe that either I'm needing some medication or time is repeating itself. I know even reading that line makes me cringe. My wife explained that she had only came in once and laughingly suggested that I was working way too hard. Example 3. I've had a bad head cold for a few days and I'm not sleeping too well. At 3:20 a.m. this morning I got up to use the toilet, making sure to keep as quiet as possible as my son starts work early and wakes at 4:15 a.m. to start at 5. I returned to bed, was getting back under the covers when my wife woke up, looked at the digital clock and said, "Go make sure T was up for work." I don't hear him, so he has maybe slept, and I looked at the clock and it was 3:55. Now I know I'm getting older, but I don't need 35 minutes to pee. And I know it was 3:20 when I went to the toilet. Finally, I have 2 dogs, Cocker Spaniels, and one of them has developed the psychological fear of me since yesterday morning. If I go into the living room, she paces round the outside of the room and won't come to me. If I leave the door open, she will pace the room, then run into the kitchen. My wife thinks I stood on her or gave her a fright. Rubbish.
I have had my own very real reality glitch or time warp. Several years ago I was visiting my parents who live over an hour and a half away from me. The time was 9:12 p.m. when I started the car and proceeded to go home. I had a very strange feeling as I passed under an overpass about 10 minutes away from my parents. I remember listening to the radio and everything felt very still. Even the air felt stale. My passengers were sleeping, so I was alone. I remember that the street lights along the freeway were passing so fast. I know that I was not speeding, having seen several police officers on the trip there. I was extra careful about my driving. All of a sudden I was pulling down my driveway and the time was only 9:28. I called my mom and dad from my home phone to let them know that we made it home safe. It's a family thing, worrying. My dad answered the phone and was completely shocked that I was home. He thought it was some kind of joke. My normal 90-minute trip turned into a 16-minute trip. He and I still talk about it. I wish I could explain it. At least I have others that I can talk with.
Me and my friend Kesha used to walk down to Burgess Park in the evening with our kids to feed the ducks. Quite often it was dark and the gates to that part of the park locked, but there was a gap in the railings to squeeze through. So we used to do this regularly. The kids enjoyed it and it was a nice walk and could still walk through the rest of Burgess. It's massive and mostly not gated off. Well, one night after we fed ducks, we came out and saw just over the hilltop in the ungated part the red and white striped top of a circus tent. Well, so we presumed. All the children saw it too, so we said that the next day we would inquire about ticket prices, etc. But it was so late we didn't want to go over then. We did think it was odd, however, there were no posters advertising any circus. Well, we went home and the next day went to find out about the circus. There was no tent. No evidence on grass to suggest there had been a tent of any kind, and we saw a park keeper and asked him. He said no circus had been recently, and one did come yearly but not recently, and afterwards was such a mess left on grass to show it had been there. We were totally baffled by what it was. That area is called the Butterfly Burrow, and in the part of the park where the duck pond is there is this waterfall of a metal owl. It has 6s for eyes. The next one is also mine. It was about 2 a.m. where I live now about 6 months ago, and me and my daughter were up. She's almost 11. I was on the internet on the laptop and suddenly the connection went off in the Sky TV. My internet was through the Sky connection. I was checking the leads and connections and found that the plug had disappeared. Yes, there should have been 5 plugs. I counted them all and one was gone. I asked my daughter to check too, and we unplugged everything and one by one reconnected everything to no avail, as one plug was missing. One lead had disappeared. So I was very frightened and tried to be calm so as not to scare her. I said, "Oh, it's very late, let's go to bed," and I disconnected everything again, and the next morning I got up and rushed down to check the plugs and internet and TV. And there was 5 plugs again and all worked fine when I connected them. My dad told me about his nephew a good few years ago this happened. They were about to go on holiday and my cousin went back in the house to check that everything was switched off just to double check. He put his car keys on the kitchen counter and when he turned to pick them up they were gone. They searched everywhere and still no keys to be found. He was so bemused by it all he got regressed a short while after, and in regression he remembered putting the keys down and after when they were gone, but in between there was no memory at all, nothing. Those few seconds of his life were just like gone. So odd, and by the way the keys never turned up and they live in that house to this day. And this happened to my dad. My dad does charity fundraising and he stands outside shops. It's all legit and above board, just in case anyone wondering. Well, he used to go to an area in our town and stand there outside a supermarket several occasions when he was having a bad day in other places. He said this place was always very good for collecting. He said he had to walk up a path and across a muddy field, and that the first time he went there he was surprised as he had never seen it before. Then one day he went there and got off the bus and this path and field were not there. He couldn't find them at all. So he went to another shop which he knows is not the same one, as he knows the area very well, and to date he still goes to this one. He grew up around there in that area, which is why he was surprised the first time he found this place that now has disappeared. Anyway, he says that was it. He has never seen the path or field or supermarket again.
About 2 years ago, my wife and I went to the mall to buy her an iPod. This isn't a very big mall, Memorial City Mall in Houston. We walk in and ask a security guard where the Apple store is. She points us in the direction and we head off. We got to the end of the mall, but we didn't see the store. So we find a map and look for it. We find it on the map and I see that it's next door to a store called Booyaka. I told my wife that I saw that store. It stood out to me because it was an unusual name, at least to me. So we head back the way we came. We come up to the Booyaka store, but the Apple store is not next door. My wife says something like, maybe the map is old and the location changed, so we keep walking. Now we're back where we walked into the mall. So once again we turned around. We get back to the Booyaka store and look all around us. No Apple store. At this point we're starting to get a little frustrated. We take maybe 10 steps and something catches my attention out of the corner of my eye. It's one of those 4-foot iPod displays they have in the window. I'm like, WTF? We're right in front of the Apple store. We were both dumbfounded. Had I been alone, I would have assumed I was daydreaming and just passed by the store. But it was both my wife and I who never saw the store. And we knew where it was from the map. Probably the strangest thing that has happened to me that someone else witnessed.
Here is something really strange that happened to me. When I was 8, me and a friend were going to visit the pigs in the pig pen on his farm. The pen had an electric fence around it. I jumped over the fence, and the loop on my shoelace was around the lowest metallic string in the fence. The string was solid from corner to corner on the fence, and it went through my shoelace. After a lot of electrical shocks and frantic untying, I got loose. Me and my friend remember this clearly, and I can't see how that is possible. Probably not the greatest story in this thread, but it was the first thing that popped into my head.
One day while at college, me and a friend decided to walk from our campus to the next one. Something we had never done before, but I've done hundreds of times since. The walk between our campus and the other one took us around 30 or 40 minutes, with us casually chatting along the way. Upon realizing the time, we decided to walk back. Lessons were starting within the next 30 minutes. As before, we were casually chatting and took the exact same route, however this time it took us less than 5 minutes. The road is completely straight and I have made this route hundreds of times since that day. I had lessons on that campus the following years. There is no way the walk could have taken 30 or 40 minutes, hell, we could probably crawl it in close to that time. We were both completely dumbfounded by this and still have no idea what happened.
Okay, so this just happened to me on Saturday and I am still trying to figure it out. I went up to the bar with my buddy Chad and his girlfriend Chloe to shoot some pool and have a few drinks. We played 3 games of pool and I had about 2 beers at that time. We were getting ready to leave and go over to a friend's house, so we made our way to the front patio in front of the bar. As soon as I got outside, I started to light up a cigarette and I saw a bright flash of white, and a second later I was in a completely different place on a road and had no clue where I was. I quickly looked at my watch as my cell phone has been recently shut off and I'm switching phone providers and no time has passed at all. I was very confused and worried. I started walking down the street. I walked for almost 2 hours before I found a street I could recognize and realized it was an entire city over about a 15-minute drive from the bar. I was nowhere near my home, but my buddy Steve lived not far from where I was, so I ran as fast as I could to his house. He wasn't home, but he's a very good friend of mine, so I went in and passed out because it was close to 3 or 4 in the morning. I woke up the next morning and got a ride home. As soon as I walked in the front door, the phone started to ring. I checked the caller ID, and it was my buddy Chad, and he sounded extremely relieved that I answered. I quickly asked him what had happened, and he said he didn't know that we were all walking out the door, and when I was lighting up my cigarette that I just started to fade and disappeared. The weird thing was that nobody seemed to notice, and neither Chad or Chloe knew what to do. They drove to my house to see if I was there because they couldn't think of anything else to do. But all in all, he was extremely happy that I had made it home and was safe because it scared the crap out of both of them. I wasn't even close to being drunk at the bar, and I am still trying to figure out how this could have happened.
Back a couple of years ago, I took a summer off to bum around Northern California. I wound up in this town where weirdness and glitches were about as normal as eating breakfast. There was a guy I met while I was there who was a glitch unto himself. He walked everywhere he went, but he got places way faster than you could walk even at a brisk pace. One day I watched him, and as he was strolling away, he just kind of jumped like he was crossing the street, and then an instant later he was 4 blocks away. I don't think he had any idea that he was doing that, but he did it a lot anyway. He also told me about a time when he was driving up north of this town. He and his wife were having the worst fight they'd ever had, and he just snapped and took the car off of a hill where the road curved around, killing himself, his wife, and their son. Except that at the moment they'd have died from the impact, they all found themselves going around the same hill in their unwrecked car, badly shaken. He says he remembers the lurch of going over and seeing the ground fly towards him, the impact, and then suddenly they were just driving along again. He said that when he met his wife, he knew that he had been put on the earth to love and protect her, and he figured that by killing her he had violated that purpose, so it all just clicked back to the point where he could just keep driving. I don't know about that part, but as for the story, I don't think he was lying to me. In my time in this town, I met a guy who I liked, and we started seeing each other. It lasted about a week before he was gonna move on to a different town, and I refused to go with because it was such an abrupt decision and I hadn't known him for a long time. The day that we broke up, my mom saw us together with one of our mutual friends going towards the church where we hung out a lot, and another mutual friend saw us together at the park. These were people who knew that we had split up, so it was curious to see them seeing us together again so soon. As we were spotted throughout the day, I was at the library drowning my sorrow with the internet. I don't know where he was, but we were most certainly not together that day. The people who spotted us weren't people who would have mistaken other people for us either, and even if they had been, he was the only green-haired guy in town, and I doubt that my own mother would think somebody else was me.
There was a theory going around here at one point that these and other reality glitches are leftovers from experiments like Project Rainbow done carelessly in the 1950s without any regard for future results. Einstein's theory that light, once bended, inadvertently bend space and time was a key factor in later experiments of this kind and could explain why we are still seeing residual effects 70 years in the future. Many odd things were conducted in those times, most never made it to public knowledge. I have experienced this phenomenon once before when my eyelids were closed and yet I could see through them. It lasted until I opened my eyes and closed them again. The Bermuda Triangle, as we've all heard, is an area frequently reported to experience glitches like this, with people reporting the absence of reflections among other things within its perimeter.
Hello, I have perused this site for years but never took it upon myself to actually sign up for a membership, until I too experienced a glitch in reality. A little about myself: I am 26 years old, have a 7-month-old daughter and a lovely fiancé, and have been attending college with the hopes of becoming an elementary school teacher. Anyhow, onto the glitch. A few nights ago my fiancé and I were sitting in the living room. She had our sleeping daughter in her arms and I was messing about on my new MacBook, learning the ropes after being a PC loyalist for years. I believe the Food Network show Good Eats was on at the time as well, and the room was otherwise dark, lit only by the glow of the television and the glow of my monitor. From the coffee table I was working at I have a view of the kitchen doorway of our duplex, which was pitch black. I believe I was on a humor website, so I was experiencing no morbid or dark impulses or thoughts. Regardless, I caught a sight out of my peripheral vision and glanced up. Now, I rationally tried to explain what I saw next as maybe a ghosted image caused when I glanced up from a lit screen to a dark doorway. Unfortunately, the only image on my screen at the time was 2 paragraphs of text. What I saw will remain with me, not because it was horrific but because it was so foreign. I saw a tall man standing there, indistinct except for the clothing he wore. I would say the figure was about 7 feet tall including the hat he wore, and yes, I got a distinct impression it was a male figure. It's odd how the details are set like concrete in my mind, but when I try to recall the event it seems hazy. The recollection is similar to a dream upon waking, more and more vague with every thought of it. What I gathered in the moment I saw it was as follows: tall, as I said, and clad in a brown smoking jacket and brown trousers of some smooth material, a matching bowler hat, and black shoes of some dull material. For some reason my mind connected this image I saw with something historical as opposed to a reproduction. What I mean by that is I got the impression that this was a figure from the 1930s or 40s as opposed to a reproduction of what the 30s and 40s style of dress was. The figure took a single large step forward and vanished behind the bookshelf I have at the entrance to the hallway. That was the only movement I witnessed. It didn't float, it stepped. One important fact: I received throughout the experience no feeling of either peace or horror, merely a dull certainty that it did occur. I was not afraid or elated, which is a bit odd. Prior to this I have never experienced anything of the supernatural or paranormal. I am an avid urban explorer, and throughout my explorations of abandoned factories and burned-out houses, partially demolished churches and ancient crime scenes, I have never had even a slightly frightening encounter, nor a whisper of anything odd or out of place. As a result, I tend to view this experience with a somewhat soft but still critical eye, and I have come to the conclusion that what I witnessed is not necessarily a ghost, but a skipped record. I believe that what I witnessed is akin to 2 images overlapping in a bizarre way, or a CD repeating the same 3-second snippet of song over and over.
I know this happened. I have no idea how to listen. I was working in a warehouse, 4:30 to 9 o'clock Saturday morning. I am a smoker, and early that morning on my 10-minute walk to the bus, I had no fire, so I had to wait until the bus stop, where I bought a Bic lighter at the gas station on the corner. Lit my smoke, took the bus. At 9, I put my work clothes in the locker and left the locker room. I was in shorts and sandals. It was May, but the weather was nice. Anyways, as I was walking down the stairs, I took out my lighter, noticed I didn't take the sticker off yet. I peeled it off, while going down, and threw the rolled up sticker in the garbage at the bottom of the stairs, lit smoke, went home. At home, I set up an Axis and Allies game, and after round 1, decided it was time for a smoke. I took out a lighter and the sticker was still there. I was dumbfounded at the time. My cousin was there, but he didn't see me take it off at work. I did take off the sticker at work. I always do it when I buy lighter, but it was early that day, so I forgot. But leaving work, I was wide awake, ready for the day. I remember distinctly taking off the sticker. I remember my clothes. I remember walking down the stairs, rolling up the sticker, throwing it in garbage. Very strange. I'm open-minded, but I have rationalized it as if I did a magic trick, without knowing how I did it. That or Matrix glitch.
There was one time when my wife and I were driving. I pulled up to a red light, looked to my left and had no idea where I was at. Did not recognize a thing even though this was right down the street from our house and had been at this stoplight many times before. I looked to my right and looked back left and then everything came back. It was the freakiest thing ever. I know there is a term for this, Jamais vu. It is the opposite of deja vu. But it has only happened that one and I'm kind of glad.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.